Hello and welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce Influencer Series. This is a spin-off of our highly successful Login and Learn web series. My name is Richard Pettis. I'm President and CEO of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. The Influencer Series is an intimate, thought-provoking discussion with prominent community leaders about the most crucial issues facing San Antonio. Our goal is to elevate policy discussions and keep our community informed, and it has never been more necessary than today. We realize that San Antonians are battling a colossal challenge and one that has tested our livelihoods and our lives. The decisions made today will have generational consequences, but our hope is that San Antonio will flourish and emerge more resilient than ever. Today's guest is City Manager Erik Walsh. Our City Manager will tell us a little bit about the city's perspective on COVID-19 and the impact on the city's budget, and who knows wherever else we might go. And with that, I'll introduce our guest. As the city's chief executive officer, Erik Walsh oversees 13,000 plus employees, manages an annual operating budget and capital budget of over $2.8 billion, and serves 1.5 million residents. Erik began his 24-year career with the city as a budget analyst, promoted to assistant city manager in 2006 and deputy city manager in 2011. Erik took the helm last March and has been doing an excellent job as our city manager. Erik, we're so pleased to have you join us. And if I could just say, of course, I met you when I was elected to the city council back in 2003. I think you were still in the budget office at the time. And I, of course, have seen you grow and develop as a professional and, of course, now as leader of our city, the 7th largest city. And I'm proud to call you friend and welcome to our show.
Thank you, Richard, for inviting me. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it?
It does. It does. But, you know, I remember my son was like 5 years old, and now he's 23 and he's taller than me, and it's almost hard to believe that much time has passed, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for joining us. I'm really honored and really pleased, and looking forward to a good dialogue.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so question number one. The city can easily be categorized as a large employer, and you all are responsible for many functions that can be categorized as essential, non-essential, of course, in these times of essential and non-essential, but you've got professionals, you've got skilled employees, you've got non-skilled employees. Tell me how you manage such a large cadre of employees over such a wide array of functions and over such a wide physical footprint. How do you do that?
You have a good team. You have to have a team. It's beyond just one person's ability. And so I rely heavily on my executive leadership team, our chief financial officer, our deputy city manager, and the 4 assistant city managers to kind of manage their book of business. And as you stated, we are 24/7. We've got at least at the last count 36 lines of distinct business as a corporation. And we stay connected as best as possible. In an organization this size, not just the city, but in any organization, being able to make sure that we're providing consistent direction and communication and leadership, even in normal times, Richard, frankly, is critical. And if you can do that and have a good tempo set during normal times, it makes it a hell of a lot easier when you go through the last 2.5 months like we have.
Sure. So tell me, what is your average work week like? I mean, I know that I generally put in, 50 hours, generally. I will say, though, that this COVID stuff, it seems like I'm working even harder and my team's working even harder because we're having to work this way, and working this way takes so much more coordination. So I'm really starting to approach the 60-hour a week, even though it's hard to believe because the office is empty here. I'm here at my office downtown, like you are downtown, and it's empty, but I'm working harder. So tell me a little bit about how your day looks like and your weeks look.
There is no, it's been 7 days a week. It's been all day. There are, especially as we entered into this in middle of March, but for your viewers' perspective, the city was dealing with an element of COVID when we had the cohorts that were evacuated to Lackland.
Yep.
And looking back, and that feels like 10 years ago, But looking back, that really put the city in a position where, our fire department, our metro health department, the local hospitals, we had to organize and quickly organize on how we were going to manage through that. And as painful as that process was, it set us up in a position where when the middle of March came around, we were already organized. We had those connections already made. Basic things like, where do COVID patients go? Which hospital? What
Mm.
floor? Who do we coordinate with? And I think that set us up to be ahead of our peer cities here in Texas, certainly, because we were the only ones, us and Northern California, where the other base where cohorts were being brought in, were the only parts of the country that were really spinning up to deal with it at the local level.
That's an excellent point. So we, in essence, had a head start, if you will, and then certainly a head start is what you want in a race. And I guess this was certainly a race for us to prepare ourselves for the larger hit. And I think, to be very honest with you, I think we've done an excellent job. And kudos to you and your team for all that hard work.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell me a little bit about how are you providing PPE to your employees, particularly first responders, but not even just first responders. So, folks that are still collecting our trash, for example. What's that process look like?
So the first priority, and this happened again mid-March, when we started to anticipate a lot of issues. We made sure that our first responders had PPE, and we put in orders early. We also we as a big organization, we've got inventories ourselves, and we tried to get ahead of that. And there have been rules put in place early on for our workplace, for our first responders. Mm-hmm. Number one, to keep them safe. And number two, to set policies in place of when they use that PPE. We changed how we respond. Maybe 90 days ago, if there was a medical call in someone's house, you had 4 firefighters coming in. Well, right now that means 4 sets of PPE. Now there's 2 firefighters go in, and they evaluate, and then we determine whether or not everybody else has to gown up. So little things like that. Number one, it keeps the employees safe, and number two, it helps conserve our own inventories. For the other employees, for the rest of our employees that are still out and about doing normal work like solid waste or public works or traffic, some of our parks folks, and even some of our employees who have been redeployed to other efforts, we have provided both surgical masks, but also cloth masks. And, early on, and it must have been Northern California, had started talking about the requirement of masks. We put a pretty large order in for our own workforce. And then we put a local order in for cloth masks that have the ability to put a sort of filter in between.
Yep.
And we've distributed about 3,000 of those to our employees. They can be washed. And we want to make sure that hand sanitizer is available to all employees, that face coverings are available to all our employees. We've encouraged them, and I see it firsthand as I'm walking downtown. Public works truck will be at the traffic light, and you see both employees in there with the face covering. We're trying to really provide that messaging out. It protects themselves, it protects their fellow coworkers, and it protects the community.
That's fantastic. Well, just for a little context for those watching, so today is May the 8th, Friday, May the 8th, and of course, this thing basically hit us back in February of 2020, so we're still in 2020, May 2020. So a lot of things have happened in a really, really short period of time.
Yeah. I mean, there's been no, the city for any type of emergency has to have a set of plans on file with the state, and we had a pandemic emergency plan on file that had been last updated in 2008, 2009 when H1N1 had come through the state. We're going to have to rewrite all that stuff, Richard. I mean, the scale and scope of what people were thinking about in 2009 about a pandemic And it's just not us. It's every probably
Sure.
local government, state government, and probably the federal government will have to rewrite plans based on the activity and the actions that have been taken over the last 2.5 months.
Sure, sure. Well, tell me a little bit about your thoughts about when you might think you'll be able to bring employees back into the physical workspace.
Mm-hmm. So the quick answer to that is I'm not in a big hurry, and let me explain. Let me explain what's behind that. In January, before all this, we worked on a policy to try to test and pilot some remote work opportunities for employees. We were hearing from employees that they wanted the ability to remote work, and we had identified about 6 or 7 departments to do about 200 people, and there was a lot of, that's change, and there was a lot of teeth gnashing. But I was really pushing the team to let's try it. Well, then the middle of March happens.
So was this a focus on efficiency, or just wanted to try it? I mean, what was the impetus?
It was a focus on efficiency, but also as a result of direct feedback from employees.
Got it.
And then the middle of March, we were just getting ready to kick off that pilot program, and then the middle of March happens, and in a period of about 8 days, we spun out about 2,400 employees.
Wow.
And so, making sure that the employees are connected to their workplace, making sure they have the right technology at home, making sure that we're productive. I've been pleased at the productivity levels. Now, you lose a connection because you're not coming into the office every day, and so one of the I've got a group that is internally looking at the reopening of multi parts of our organization, and I think it's going to look differently going forward. The childcare is an obvious issue that a lot of folks are dealing with right now, including a lot of my employees. But the work differently. Maybe you rotate in once or twice a week, and you're working to connect with team. Maybe we have alternative work schedules, but I'm not in a big hurry to bring a lot of people back. But I think to your question, your original question, we're looking right now on how we can phase and scale a lot of our functions back up in a logical manner, just like the governor's plan is outlined, just like the economic transition team outlined to the council earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be parts of our organization that I think are going to be more on the tail end of it, like our senior nutrition centers.
Sure.
When we shut those down, we're still delivering meals to those folks. But the great thing about the senior nutrition sites weren't necessarily that was the food. It was the social interaction of our seniors, and they're a vulnerable population, and we're going to really think hard about how we bring that group back together. But I'm anticipating scaling that, having a plan here in the next week, and scaling it through the early part of June.
That's great. Well, so one of the insights, of course, as a result of having my master's degree in public administration with an emphasis in city management and having worked in city management, and then of course having been an elected official here, is if you don't really know the industry, you don't really realize how deep the city penetrates into people's lives. And I think a great example is the nutrition centers. I didn't realize that I had 13 nutrition centers in District 4 when I was on the city council. And then, of course, I got into a habit of visiting them. And indeed, that social interaction is so important to those individuals because, generally they're living alone. Yeah. So it's not a husband and wife anymore. It's now just one spouse because the other one has passed away. Kids generally don't live in the city. They live somewhere else. So they're kind of on the phone and interaction like that. And so being able to keep their minds fresh and active is extremely important. So I'm glad that you're focusing some of your team on figuring out how we're going to do that once we get back to normal, whatever normal looks like.
Yeah.
So a little bit about you all as an economic development generator. So you all award literally millions of dollars in contracts for infrastructure, goods, services, and a lot of that actually stays right here with local companies or companies that have an office here and that hire locally. The materials are, purchased locally or sometimes made here. So that has changed. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that impact going forward. I know you just yesterday, in fact, had an updated revenue forecast. Tell me a little bit about some of that.
So you're right. I mean, an organization this big procures millions of dollars every year for a variety of goods and services, and will be important to the ongoing recovery. I think we're going to need to maintain a focus of that. The balance is going to be, just like the private sector, we're going to continue to likely contract into next fiscal year and have to really focus on being able to respond to emergencies, this emergency, helping the communities recover, and basic services. And that whole, you mentioned it earlier, the whole discussion about what's essential and non-essential that we've all kind of gone through. I anticipate needing to do that as we prepare for the 21 budget. We one of the things that we did as part of the economic transition team report to council, and I had heard it several times from a number of small businesses that they were having a hard time procuring hand sanitizer. Face coverings not so much. The thermometers that,
oh yes,
that shoot a laser on your head. Everybody in this country is looking for that stuff. And so one of the things that we did was immediately go out to procure a little over $1.4 million in locally sourced hand sanitizer.
Okay.
And locally sourced face coverings for small businesses. And we're hoping to be able to provide, a package to up to 6,000 small businesses so that they've got a head start. The only thing we couldn't source locally were the thermometers, but as we thought through that, it was important enough to make sure that we were buying local.
Yeah.
And if that meant we had to go to 7 different places to do it, then so be it. But source it locally, because we're going to need to stimulate the local economy. I mean, that there's going to be a lot of hesitancy, and it's completely natural given what we've gone through the last 2.5 months. There's going to be a lot of hesitancy, but there's going to be a need for startup capital. There's going to be a need for people to get a paycheck, and anything the city can do to help stimulate that, that is part of our recovery role for our community.
I agree, and I know that in that economic transition team that you referred to earlier, that PPE and that plan to help those businesses and not-for-profits for that matter with that, I think is going to really help us to instill that consumer confidence that we're all looking for. So right. That's great. Thanks for keeping your eye on that. That's a big deal, and I think it's going to go a long way. So given what we just talked about, tell me about your thoughts on the upcoming budget process. I know that generally starts in the summer. What does that process look like?
It's not going to look like it always used to look like. Let me start there. Yeah. So we were, in February, I had laid out the budget calendar for the council, and then in April told them we got to make adjustments. Obviously, what we shared with council is that there's a couple of key dates that we're going to lay out. On May 28th of this month, we're going to do our formal mid-year budget ordinance, and typically that happens 6 months into the year, early April. But we were in the middle of dealing and the response. But it's important that mid-year adjustment is going to be important because, early April, as we started to see sales tax, hotel occupancy tax, airport revenue, a whole slew of our revenue start to decrease, we made immediate adjustments to our budgets. And some of our peer cities, our major peer cities here in Texas, just had that conversation here in the last week or two. But we did it quickly the first week in April to rebalance everything and to take some pressure off of the fact that we were going to lose revenue. And it was important to do, and it was difficult to do, but the sooner we did it, the better off we were going to be. that mid-year budget in May 28th will be kind of resetting everything. There's a number of federal grants that are coming in, and we'll rebalance and give the council an update. In June, on June 20th, or the third week in June,
Okay.
we're going to do our 5-year financial forecast, which is going to be very difficult.
Sure.
We are gauging, kind of projecting impacts on revenue and recovery, kind of based on 9/11, kind of based on the 2008-2009 recession. In both those cases, recovery looks differently. In neither one of those cases did we have complete parts of our economy shut down. We're relying heavily on the state and information we're getting from them.
Yeah.
We've hired an economist to help guide us from a state perspective, and another economist to help us guide through the local perspective. So we'll do that 5-year financial forecast, and we're going to lay out what's called the trial budget, which will look like a balanced budget with the major adjustments included. And then the following week, the fourth week in June, we'll have the council work session where they can give feedback on that budget.
Got it.
Which is a little bit different. And we're trying to move that up into the summer to give the council a chance to look at it. And I say all this, we're going to have to think through how we get community input
Sure.
in this time of not having community meetings. But make sure we get good council input on a balanced budget that is probably going to be, we're going to likely need to make a lot of reductions, and then propose the budget in early August. So it's going to look very different, and the sooner we start, the better.
Well, I will say this. So what you've laid out, of course, makes a lot of sense. But as far as the engagement, I will say all of our engagement now is like this, electronic. And by that, I mean our councils, our committees, our board meetings, all of it's like this now. And interestingly enough, we have had more engagement. And by that, I mean maybe a good 10 to 20 to 23% more people engaged like this, because they couldn't formally drive, to wherever they were going. They had a conflict. Now they could do it from the comfort of their own home, or sometimes just on a cell phone. And so it's actually allowed for greater engagement. It's a different kind of engagement. So I think that ultimately we'll still be able to get a lot of good input on the budget process, I hope.
Yeah, I'm confident. Frankly, I have found, and I'm kind of a face-to-face meeting person.
Me too, yeah.
And we've all had to adjust. And I have even found myself being a little bit more efficient in my day by being able to make these connections through these type of conversations.
Good.
And I'd have been the last one to ever try it, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, so the city's getting about $270 million from the federal government to deal with the COVID. I know that you and I have had a couple of discussions about what some of the money could be used for. And so we are, as an organization, coming up with some ideas, but I think ultimately, Erik, it's going to fall on workforce development. It's going to fall on probably some kind of a recommendation to you all about being able to develop a program that can help small and micro businesses that are not banked right now or don't have a big banking relationship, because we know that's important to help with the payroll protection program and all those things. Child care. The other thing that's come up a lot, Erik, is the digital divide, right? And so many areas of our community have trouble with the internet access. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that. I know it's very broad and wide, and there's nothing permanent. Of course, you got to get the mayor and the council's input. But what are you thinking?
So, and we had this conversation with council yesterday, and so the month of May, we're going to be working on a plan to present back to them the first week in June. But that $270 million was part of a $150 billion allocation that the federal government provided to states and local governments, and urban areas with population over 500,000 got a direct allocation. And so our allocation was $270 million. I think Bexar County got right about $79-80 million. And it has to be, there's a couple of things we've got to keep in mind. that it has to be spent for services incurred by December 30th of this year.
Okay.
It has to be related to COVID expenses that weren't previously budgeted. It is available to be able to do some of the things you talked about. Obviously, how, and this isn't a disparaging remark, but what we've seen in the last 60 days, our approach, our community approach to workforce development has cratered in 60 days. I mean, people have a lot of San Antonians have lost their jobs.
Sure.
And so we need to stay focused. And I think as we identify what the need is and bring that back to council and get some feedback from council, I think the things you just talked about are really high on everybody's list. Workforce development, some attempt to bridge that digital divide. And let me be a little bit more narrow about what I'm talking about. There are whole segments of children that were unable to connect to school in this remote learning environment. And I heard the mayor say this a couple of weeks ago, and it really rang true in my head. It's almost like a public utility requirement. Everybody deserves running water and electricity. And in this day and age, there should be the ability to connect. So that's going to be high on everybody's list, Richard. I think small businesses, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of folks, there was a high demand for the PPP program that the federal government laid out, or the SBA loan program, but not everybody was able to take advantage of that. So what is it that we can do, that the city can do with this money to help those small businesses get their feet underneath them and move forward? The sooner we can get back to business, the sooner that people can get back to working and get a paycheck, the sooner we'll be back on track. I do think that long-term workforce development will be the bigger issue that we'll deal with as a community, and making sure that we can attune ourselves and maybe overall increase the education level, which, and you've been around, Richard, the education level, San Antonio's education level gets compared to other cities, and we're not as high as we want to be. What's that point on the horizon we want to shoot for, and how can we raise the tide for all boats?
Excellent. Well, I think definitely the time is right. And of course, 270 million is not enough for us to solve the problem, but certainly I think we could put some programs into place and test them. And if they have some efficacy, take those to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're all going through the last 2.5 months is forcing us all to reprioritize and focus on what's important. And I think we're all going to be going through that together.
I agree. So shifting a little bit, City of San Antonio, I think we've been doing just a stellar job. You, your team, our elected officials, I'm very, very happy and proud. Tell me about, so you are a part of, a network of other city managers and strong mayors and the like. Tell me about, what are you hearing from your colleagues? How are they doing? I mean, what's the industry look like?
The city managers of Dallas, TC Broadnex, who used to work here,
yes, of course,
8 or 9 years ago, city managers of Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and myself have spent a lot of time checking in with each other, especially early on. And that's when I sort of gauged that at least we had talked to the hospitals. I mean, during that whole Lackland, they hadn't done any of that stuff. And then every one of those urban areas is a little bit different. The health department is a city department that provides health services to the entire county. In Dallas, for example, the health department is a county department. So the city has very little input and control. So everybody's in a little bit of a different spot. So we've been talking a lot, and I think we've learned from each other. And then beyond Texas, Richard, there's a group of large city managers that talk twice a year, and we've had a couple of big phone calls as a group, and they're cities in the U.S. and Canada, and there's about 25 of us, and I've learned a lot from there too, and in particular, my counterparts on the West Coast, and I can recall a conversation. I still remember the date. It was on Friday, March 13th. We had a call with big city managers, and the city manager of San Jose was on the call, a guy by the name of Dave Sykes. And San Jose had been dealing with this for about 3 weeks. So they were about 3 weeks ahead of everybody else in the country. And he was talking about what they'd gone through, and they had a whole slew of firefighters that were in quarantine, and they're, positives all over the place. And I asked Dave, I said, what would you do differently today that you wish you would have done 3 weeks ago? And he said, I should have shut down the libraries. I should have shut down the community centers. We should have instituted policies at the fire stations, and we didn't. We waited. We hesitated. And I remember the day because March 13th was the day that we started shutting programs down at the city. And that connection was helpful for me. I'm sure it was helpful for, the managers in Florida and in Arizona and here in Texas. And that network is really important because it's not like anybody can say, well, I've been through this before and this is how we got through it. We're all kind of feeling our way through a dark room, especially in the middle of March. And so that network has been important.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you're drawing upon that. I too am part of a couple of big city chamber networks, also the big cities in Texas, and we talk quite a bit. And particularly, we were talking a lot about the whole opening of the state of Texas, the governor's strike force and all that. So it is definitely good to be able to understand what's going on over there, bring those learnings here, and help inform our work going forward. So that's good.
Richard, let me add one thing because I think it's important, and I'm not saying this because I'm the city manager. I'm saying it because I'm a San Antonian. But one thing I've seen that sets us apart locally from my counterparts that I've been talking about is that the city and the county here, the city of San Antonio and Bexar County, have been working really well together.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that how good that makes me feel from a San Antonio perspective, but from a productivity standpoint. And that hasn't been the case that I've seen from some of my counterparts in other parts of the state and the country. And that, I think that helps us be more productive, more efficient, be very targeted in our response, and assure that we're all kind of working on the same issues at the same time.
Sure. Good. Well, that's great. And I would agree with you 100%. And having, of course, been an elected official and now on this side as a leader of the business community, being able to have the county and the city together, working together. And of course, that historic joint meeting that you all had of the county commissioners court and the city council. I mean, that's real progress and real opportunity to coordinate and be on the same page.
Yeah.
So excellent. Congratulations to you. So, we talked a little bit about, the opening up of the economy. The governor has begun that process with 25% occupancy in restaurants, all that sort of thing. Of course, the other side of the coin is the fear and are we ready? Do we have enough? If we have another spike, how prepared are we as a community to be able to deal with that?
I think we're very prepared, and that's part of the planning that went into the health transition team report that the council got last week. I just spent the morning over at the Metro Health Department looking at what our scale up plan is, both in multiple scenarios, whether we see no peaks, 2 peaks, 3 peaks, 1 peak, how we're scaling up testing, PPE, policies in place. We'll be very prepared. I'm confident of that.
That's great. Well, and so that gives us all confidence to keep kind of moving down that path, right, to opening. We want to do it right. We, of course, always have to have safety. And, of course, the experts, and you all have put together a great health transition team that has really been providing some good confidence in what you all are doing. So thanks for that. Those are the kinds of things, business needs certainty. That's what we thrive on. And that uncertainty has just got us all nuts. So
right.
That is really helping us very much. So we're getting to the end of our time here, Erik. So tell me a little bit about what are your thoughts? What is San Antonio going to look like post-pandemic. And I'm not even asking you to tell me when post-pandemic is, but we'll eventually get there. And so what do you think that looks like for all of us? You as the leader of our municipal government, you as a San Antonian, you as a consumer, tell me about just your general thoughts on what something like that might look like.
Well, I think we're all going to come out of this a lot more resilient and a lot more appreciative of each other. I think folks will realize, we'll all realize better how we are all interconnected, and how small businesses and large businesses here in town provide the backbone and wherewithal and the paychecks and the careers for San Antonians. I'm hopeful that we can stay focused on some of the potholes that have been uncovered by this pandemic, and how it's impacted parts of our community differently from others, and be able to focus on long-term fixes. Short-term, there's a high degree of immediate need.
Yeah.
But I think we need, and we need to address that. But I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and figure out what the long-term fixes are. That will determine whether or not San Antonio is resilient a year from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, and trying to rise the tide for all boats, as I mentioned earlier. And that's going to be hard. We're all going to have to stay focused on that. I'm proud of the fact, from an organizational standpoint, there are 4 different types of employees right now. There are the first responders and Metro Health, the folks on the front lines. There are remote work employees that have had to change quickly. There are redeployed employees that used to do something and are now doing something that is needed in this community response. And then there are the fourth group are all the employees that are still doing their job that everybody relies upon. Trash has to get picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Street work has to be done.
Stray animals have to be picked up.
Animals, all that stuff. And so, in my mind, it's narrowed into 4 different groups of employees. Now, we do a bunch of different things. And I think as an organization, we're going to be a lot more resilient. And I'd have been on this show 75 days ago saying we're resilient, but I would have also probably held up a piece of paper that says we have a pandemic plan, right? We're all going to change, and my goal for the organization is going to be that we're in a better position to be able to handle, maneuver, be nimble, think outside the box, and rethink our organization. I told the council yesterday that there are 3 things that we're going to have to think through as part of this budget. We're going to have to restructure our finances. We're going to have to recover, and the recovery part is not just the city but the community, and we're going to have to rethink because things will look differently, and we need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, well, those are powerful words, and I think they're right on. And of course, they're a little bit different for everyone, but you have a very unique perch. And I think what you've just outlined is indeed the right strategy for us going forward as a municipal organization, but also as a community. So, Erik, thanks for joining us. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of your time, of your candid dialogue. You're a very approachable person. You're a straightforward person. You work hard and you take pride in that work. And I can see that just by having known you and, of course, seeing you do your work. So congratulations to you. You should be very proud of yourself and your team.
Yeah.
It's real progress. It's real opportunities to enhance people's lives. And of course, real opportunities for us to continue to move forward as a community. So congratulations and thank you.
Richard, can I say one thing?
Of course.
So I want to thank you because those early days from the middle of March through probably early part of April, I think I talked to you almost every day. And there was a list of people that I was making sure I was touching base with because there were a lot of changes happening. They were happening fast. And I want to thank you for your input and your guidance and really just frankly answering the phone, because there was a lot of uncertainty there and it was happening every day. and you were on a list of people that I was making sure I was touching base with and keeping updated on what was going on. So I really thank you for your time and being part of that, because it was helpful for me. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome. You're a good man. You're doing great work, and so God bless you and your family. And we'll continue to move on together. And that partnership, I think, makes us all stronger and enhances our community.
Amen. All right, rock and roll.
Thank you. All right, take care.
See you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'm going to close our show. Thank you all for joining us. Again, this is the Influencer Series that we're kicking off, and it's going to be replete with individuals like Erik, who are influencers, literally influencers, moving this community forward, helping us build today and tomorrow. And so more to come. With that, I'm signing off and saying thank you for joining us.